All right, it is now 1 o'clock, so I will hand it over to Evelyn Nelson to get us started here.
Super, thanks so much, Christy. We're really appreciate folks joining us today. It's great to see some new and returning faces on the screen, and really it looks like from across the state. So thanks so much for joining our Calming the Inner Storm presentation today. I also just want to say in general a big thank you for all that you on the group are doing in supporting our students and families through outer storms. And we hope that what we share today may be useful now or in the future. I have a few house cleaning items that I want to touch base. First off, the session's being recorded, and that's so we can share it afterwards. So you'll have the information. Your microphones have been muted, but we really welcome you unmuting or using the chat. We'd love to hear what's on your minds on this important topic. Your completion certificates will be emailed. With that, we really appreciate if you can enter your name and organization in the chat. Many of you are on top of this already, but please do enter in the chat as you have time. Also, we'd love it if you could put your name in the Zoom box by hitting the three little dots at on the Zoom screen and being able to change your name. So no further ado, I know we have a lot of fantastic content to cover today. So I'd like to introduce our speaker. It's really my privilege to work with Stephanie Punt. She is earning her doctorate degree in clinical psychology with a health psychology emphasis at the University of Kansas, and really fortunate to have her expertise in our Telehealth Rocks lab. Right now, she's joining us from UCLA, where she's completing her internship and just inches away from the doctorate, where she's specializing in psychotherapy to patients in the hospital and neuropsychological evaluations. She has a lot of interest in working with individuals with chronic illness and behavioral health concerns, advocating for patients experiencing cognitive challenges and strategies to promote resilience. So again, welcome all of you, and welcome Stephanie. We look forward to hearing what you and our many participants have to share today.
Hey, nice to meet you all, and glad to see some of you again. Thank you for the introduction, I appreciate it. So just like Evelyn said, I definitely would like this to be more of a conversation versus kind of me just blurting information at you all for about 1 to 2 hours. So the more you're able to either unmute to share kind of your experiences, or just to add some stuff in the chat would be great, because I think there's definitely a lot, like you all have lots of great experiences, and I think those experiences, if we share them together, can really help kind of just improve what we do and get ideas from other people, which is great. So in terms of kind of what is calming the inner storm, it's all about kind of talking about resilience and ways that we can try to bolster things that we're probably already doing to help the families and kiddos that we work with, ourselves, our own families. So hopefully there'll be some strategies that maybe you identify with and go, and might think to yourself, oh, hey, like this is stuff I'm already doing. That's great. Or maybe there might be some new strategies that you take a look at and you think, hey, I might try that out with my classroom or with the people I'm working with. So this is a picture. I like this picture. This is a picture from Clinton Lake over in Lawrence. So just kind of think about that the calm factor. So if you think about, right, our cell phones, we place so much value on this thing being charged, right? To play games, to be able to contact the outside world. And I know for me, if I ever see my battery, whether it be on my headphones or on my phone, drop into that 10% category, right? It becomes a priority for me to go try to figure out, how do I plug this in, right? Who has a charger? My number one priority shifts from what I'm doing to try to figure out how can I make sure my phone lives. So we think about how much attention we can really place on something like our phone, right? A big communication device. It's interesting to think about how a lot of times when we notice our own battery is getting low, that we don't tend to put the same focus or emphasis to try to recharge ourselves. So our ability to bounce back from things really is dependent on how full our battery is. So if you have one takeaway from this, I hope it's to, kind of the idea that we would place as much urgency to try to recharge our own battery as we would our phone. So just something to think about. All right, so Christy's gonna kind of help take charge of this section. Let me stop sharing. And we're gonna do some word clouds together because I think it's helpful to kind of see what you all are thinking about things, kind of where you're all coming from in terms of just words that we use a lot.
Yes, so I just put the response link in the chat. If you want to click on that, it should take you to the word cloud activity, and you can type in your word. Just a note, it does need to be all one word, or if it's multiple words, put some dashes in between so that it shows up together, and it should start populating on our screen here in just a moment.
There's definitely no right or wrong answer. Just nice to kind of get a sense of where we're all coming from. I always think it's neat to watch the structure change of the word cloud. Yeah, we appreciate you all adding to it, whether it be in the chat or to the actual cloud itself. I think it's neat to notice that strength is something that a lot of you all really relate, in terms relate to the word or the idea of resilience. Right. I think it's neat too that, right, there's that bouncing back, right. Like how can you be adaptive, right, or adaptable during these situations? There's that kind of that toughness or that strength that comes from it, and we'll definitely talk about different strategies to help kind of bolster our own personal strengths, or to kind of help us within the context of trauma or within the context of a lot of different social determinants of health. How can we still try to focus on this ability to bounce back while also being mindful of the culture that we're approaching too. Yeah, so I think it's neat that we're all kind of starting with a similar definition of resilience. Things that, well, I think there's a slide associated with this too, but things that resilience is not is, I feel like a lot of times in pop culture, resilience kind of gets thrown into the same category as, right, like sucking it up, right, sticking it through, like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right, like things that don't take a lot of the different contextual factors of someone's situation into mind. I don't know if Dr. Morris has anything else to add from her work in that area.
Sure, Stephanie. Thanks for inviting me to comment, and hi everyone. Yeah, I think what Stephanie was pointing to and has definitely been My experience, especially this school year, but also last school year and working with friends in schools, is just kind of this questioning about resilience and the use of the word resilience. Just like any word, we want to make sure that we're using it accurately and trying to do things that are encouraging folks. I think sometimes resilience gets used incorrectly to try to label some very similar actually to the way that I've seen grit used, as if it's a characteristic and that it's something that is static, that can't be grown. And I think we want to make sure that we're not using it in a way that is diminishing how challenging it is, right? And so I've seen a lot of these memes lately that have said things, kind of shown, yes, I'm resilient, but like I'm also really tired. So we don't want to try to minimize how hard things are. That's not the goal there. It's what kinds of skills and strategies do we have to try to work through it and cope with those difficult times that are happening.
Yeah. I think it's a great summary. Thanks so much. Yeah. Either in the chat or if anyone wants to unmute, have you all noticed differences in how resilience is talked about within your schools or school districts, or anything that comes to mind about this topic? If it's just something that you want to think about too, that's totally okay. I know that it takes a lot longer to type some things out. So if anyone thinks of anything, we can definitely kind of pull over and talk about that too. Okay, appreciate that. They haven't, don't recall hearing it mentioned specifically. Okay, whenever you're ready, Christy, can we head on to the next word cloud? All right, so this time, write either one, or if you're going to write multiple words, kind of mush them together. What comes to mind when you think of the term self-care? Those are some great messages in the chat too. And I like how some of you are defining it in terms of just how you perceive it, and also giving us some examples about how you actually practice self-care too, which is great. See that exercise is something that a lot of people turn to. We're focusing on the here and now, right? Letting your mind go. I also like that one of the words in our word cloud is necessary. That yes, right? Just like trying to recharge our own phone batteries, it is necessary to us, just to our quality of life, right? To our ability to do the things that we like to do our job. Yeah. I like that someone also added too, right? That just the recognition that self-care it's hard to do, right? If it were if it were easy, it would, everyone would be doing their own self-care routine, right? All that work-life balance would be great. No one ever complains about anything, but it's, it's really difficult to do. Depending on different stressors that you have, how stressors change. Maybe you are always someone who went to the gym and that was your own self time, right? Or eating expensive chocolates was your own kind of, taking time for yourself or self-care. But then if there's another stressor that changes, right? And it's all about how can you adapt, right? That adaptability to, right, kind of just being able to still practice some kind of self-care within this new context. Yeah, so I always think word clouds are neat because it's neat to see just, what themes are coming up. And it definitely seems like sleep, time, right? It's necessary, it's associated with health. I think those are all super important messages to kind of think about. Yeah. All right, when you're ready, Christy, can we go on to the next word cloud? I know we're starting things off with a lot of word clouds, but I think it's nice to kind of know, since we're meeting virtually, we can't all see each other in the same room, just kind of see, right, how we define things, where we're all coming from, because that can, make it easier or harder sometimes to kind of figure out how we can integrate all this information together. So some of you mentioned that it's hard to practice self-care. So what makes it hard to practice self-care? You got lots of things in the chat too that are great. Seems like in the word cloud in the chat, time is definitely a major theme, right? A limiting factor in whether or not we can practice self-care. Responsibilities. You're exactly right. Whoever wrote tired at the end of the day, because yeah, when you're tired at the end of the day, right? The last thing you want to do is try and make another decision, or it's hard to take time for yourself. Like the boundaries comment, Melissa. I know for me, if I don't actually, we'll get into the strategies more later, but if I don't plan it into my day, it doesn't happen, right? Because there's always things that come up, or you're like, oh, I gotta, responsibilities kind of get in the way, right? And so unless you actually have some kind of, for me, I have to have a scheduled time. Yeah. Well, it makes sense that time is a common theme with this. And then whenever you're ready, Christy, can we move on to the other word cloud? Okay, so to start things off, in the link that'll be in the chat in a second, if you can name one thing that you're grateful for today. Yeah, I like that someone made the comment that that you're seeing, to me, whether or not you all perceive it the same way too, but you're taking time to be in this training, and that's taking time for yourself. So I think, even if there's all these other stressors going on, you might feel like you aren't able to take time for yourself. I think it's something to celebrate that you're here today and you're participating, and that counts as self-care. Yeah, it looks like family, health, those are all, I think common themes in our group, which is neat to see. Our faith can, right, help us. Friends, coworkers. Technology, I think, is really neat too. That way we can all be together in the same virtual space. Yeah, I appreciate y'all adding into those different word clouds. Again, it just kind of helps us see where we're all starting from, right? What our working definitions are of things, and what you all just participated in the name one thing you're grateful for today. It's actually one of the strategies that is really helpful in terms of kind of bolstering our resilience, our ability to bounce back from things. Okay. I think that's it for the word clouds, right, Christy? Okay, perfect. Let me find my screen to share. And definitely, if anyone has questions, comments that come up as I'm talking, feel free to either blurt it out. You can interrupt me all you want, or definitely pop it into the chat and we can start discussing stuff. Okay, so we did our word cloud activities. Let me just click through these guys. Okay, and we already kind of went over this a little bit, but again, right, and I think everyone kind of alluded to this too in the word cloud responses, right? But how do we define resilience? It's our ability to balance back from things, their adaptive coping skills, right? And taking the context into consideration in terms of just all the different things we have going on. Through kind of bolstering resilience, right? We can try to add more tools to our toolbox. I think we all are pretty resilient people. We're here, right? There's lots of stressors that have happened in the world, especially over the past, year or two. And just in terms of like the types of jobs that you have too, right? It takes a lot of ability to bounce back from things, be creative, being flexible to be in the jobs that you're in, working with kiddos and families. And sometimes when stressors change, right? A certain tool that we have used for years and years doesn't quite work the same. And that just is more, it's not so much a reflection of you, it's a reflection of just how strange or stressful the situation can be. And so that resilience component, right, as maybe you said, it's that adaptability, it's our ability to be flexible and maybe change some of our tools out, add some more tools into our toolbox to be able to help kind of combat those stressors that come up. And again, too, it's when we talk about resilience within our group, we want to make sure it's defined more as that adaptability, flexibility, ability to bounce back, and not just to briefly or succinctly sum it up as a lot of terms that we hear out there, right? It's like suck it up, grin and bear it, that kind of stuff. So we're not in that category. We're in the more adaptive, flexible approach coping kind of stuff. So in the chat box, I think this is a fun thing to kind of think about too, and to see how different we all are. Thinking about self-care. So self-care is a type of resilience. It's one of our tools in our toolbox. And so in the chat box, you can type what color or what word, whatever speaks most to you, represents how you like to practice self-care. I always think it's so neat to see how different we all are and the same at the same time. Yeah, so looks like a lot of us, right? We like to practice self-care, and definitely keep adding to the chat. I'm just going to start summarizing. Right, there's that physical component. The cool thing is that, as you probably know, there's lots of, to geek out about the research side of things, there's tons of research that supports that the more physically active we can be, that doesn't mean like running a marathon. That just means like, going on for a walk outside, or, playing with kids, grandkids, just any kind of physical activity actually can improve mood. So if we feel kind of down and hopeless sometimes, being more physically active or walking around can help improve that. Sometimes we feel more worried or anxious about things too. The more physically active we are, the less we feel worried and anxious. So physical activity is pretty cool in that it can help us kind of regulate how we feel too. I think social, right? Spending that quality of time with someone too, is super important. We are social creatures, we're humans. And again, to geek out about the research behind it, that the more social connections we can have, that again, we tend to feel less worried or down at times when stressors increase. I like that some of you have multiple things that you turn to, like multiple tools or ways you like to experience self-care. And I think that's great because, as you probably have experienced, right, sometimes there are situations where maybe spending some quality time with someone is more beneficial. And maybe sometimes it's, more spiritual, that's more helpful. Or maybe it's, right, cleaning and organizing. If you're one of those people, maybe during, some stressors, that's more fun to do. Or helps you kind of recover, recharge your battery. So I think it's neat to see. I also like the different color hearts that you all used. I think it's neat to see just, right, how different situations can influence what we turn to. So yeah, so in terms of, right, if you think about being in like more of an educator role, that we are, in a sense, whether we want to or not, we're modeling a lot of the times to kiddos and families kind of how we cope with stress. And so I think it's neat to kind of think too that, like how with these little young minds, depending on what age you work with, that we can be a really neat influence in terms of sharing how to positively cope or adaptively cope with different stressors. Have any of you found anything helpful in terms of like bringing self-care into the classroom? You're more than welcome to unmute or type in the chat or think about it. We can come back to it later.
Sometimes when I'm feeling pretty stressed or anxious on stuff, and I'll kind of see it in the kids too, I will just say, guys, I am really wound up today. I need to just take a minute for a deep breath. Why don't you take one with me?
That's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, I think, right, if we don't sometimes understand why we feel a certain way, or just being able to say, like, just like you said, Marcy, right, like I feel not so great today, or I feel wound up, and then just to even kind of help answer the question, like, we're going to take a deep breath. And so I think that's great that you have a way that you can include the other, like the little ones in there too, and kind of realize like, oh, right, pair the two together. Wound up equals take a deep breath.
One thing that I find helpful, I don't work at a classroom. I work at home right now still, but when things are really stressful, just taking 5 minutes to reorganize my desk, like the thing right in front of me, if it's clear, even if everything behind me is chaos, I feel immediately put back together.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. And it sounds like too that if you think about, like, if there's lots of things happening to you, right, things that we don't necessarily have control over, that I think that's great, right, that you can focus on your desk and be like, I can control this one thing, what it looks like.
Yep.
Cool.
For me, it's just sit in silence, even for 5 minutes. If I'm very stressed, it could be just 5 minutes, but I cannot focus on my breathing. I have to focus on maybe the sounds around me or things like that. But even 5 minutes, when I go back, I have a different perspective of things.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up too, that for you, it's helpful to kind of observe what's around you, right? Or to listen to things or what sound like just other senses. Because I think what you bring up is that like actually a really cool thing that we researchers are like, this is amazing, is that, you know, there's not one way to cope with stuff. And for some people, focusing on breath is super helpful. And for some people, not focusing on breath, right? Breath can actually amp us up sometimes. And so focusing on our senses or kind of that observer role is actually super great. And one of the things we're actually going to talk about today. So good work.
I'll stop interrupting, but she mentioned that focusing on your breath is not helpful. It's absolutely not helpful to me either. But one thing I have is I download like albums from like movies, stuff that has no words. Like I've got like Braveheart, the one from that Johnny Depp, Peter Pan and stuff. But what I do each time I do it is I pick a different instrument that I hear in the background and I follow that through it so that I'm focusing on something, but it's something that I don't have to like, I don't really have to think about it at that point versus breathing or completely clearing my mind kind of thing. So just a trick for mindfulness for people who can't sit still.
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up, and don't worry about interrupting. I think that is super useful. I'm glad you kind of figured that out for yourself, because I feel like that's with all these strategies, as you can probably attest to, that a lot of this is kind of trial and error and figuring out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. That's great. I'm so glad we're having a conversation, because I know virtual stuff is just weird sometimes.
My grandma passed. Oh, you're good. My grandma passed in August, and one of my clients had brought me like a condolences card. Sorry, I can't talk. And obviously I was very emotional. It was probably a week after she had passed, and I started crying and showed like that it was okay to like be emotional and honor how I felt in that moment. But then I took a deep breath and kind of showed her like some deep breathing skills to kind of get myself calm. And I heard someone say that deep breathing doesn't really work for them. And I kind of figured out that you have to make sure your breathing out is longer than your breathing in, which helped me a lot. And then I asked her if I could pray. I knew she was spiritual, so I asked her if she would pray with me or if I could pray about it. And so it kind of just brought it in, and obviously it makes you closer to the client. But it was just like kind of appreciative of her to do that and showing self-care.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that happened to you, and I really appreciate you just, being willing to share that with the group.
Thank you. I appreciate that, of course.
Stephanie, I was just going to echo what you said about applauding Alyssa's kind of risk to be vulnerable there. But also, I think that's a great example. I get a lot of questions from adults working in school communities, but also parents and caregivers asking about how we should have feelings when we're in front of fill in the blank, right? So our children, other children, our colleagues, our clients, how do we have those feelings? And I think the concern is that, we're going to feel our feelings and not be able to cope with them, and that doesn't feel right. And so what I always say is that, number one, we're human. We're all actual real life human beings, and we're all having feelings all the time. So it's a state of being. So part of it is that we need to be real, but that also, especially and I'll speak to children and adolescents, that the real value is actually them seeing that arc and seeing the resolution. So that kind of, and I think our other friend who gave the example, I'm having a hard time right now. Here's what I'm going to do about it, and let's come back together afterwards, right? So they see kind of the whole story. A lot of young people don't see that whole story a lot. So they either don't see people having feelings at all because people run away and hide to have their feelings, or they see a lot of people having really big feelings but not being able to wrap them up. And neither is good, right? So we want to be able to show that we can have our feelings and we can be in that moment and be present, and then, cope and come back to the, thing that we're focusing on and sort of our job right now, and that's okay, and that it happens all the time. I just always joke about how a lot of times, you know, I put mommy in timeout, and I use that language, and just to kind of like, you know, I need a break. Mommy needs a timeout. You know, that we can all take time out sometimes. We're human and we need to be human. And if we try not to be human, it doesn't work. So again, Alyssa and others, I appreciate everything you're sharing there.
I think that's definitely correct. This is Carly. Sorry, and I'm in a hospital, so sorry for that background. The idea that emotional intelligence is a part of what's gonna affect how we communicate with our children, ourselves, and we also self-care. And I think that's what's missing. And I like what Melissa shared, because the more we're willing to say we need time out and time off and time for ourselves, the better it will be for us helping children.
And also, just to add to that too, right? You're teaching kiddos a super valuable tool, which is to ask for time, right? Or to ask for a timeout, or you know, like it's okay to feel feelings, and it's okay to ask for that space to process it too. Something that I always tell kiddos or adults, I always tell everyone the same thing, which is, you know, like I think about emotions or feelings as like it's our alarm system going off. And so, you know, maybe there's something that we're experiencing that seems not quite right, right? And so we might feel a different way or have some bigger or lesser feelings. And that's just more tied to, right, our alarm system going off. It doesn't mean you're going to stay there for forever, or, you know, or this is who you are now, right? It's just more of like, it's, you know, the alarm on our phone going off, telling us that we need to do something, maybe taking that time. And great comments in the chat too. I think it's really neat. Like I think Paula shared that she does group and one-on-one work with students, and trying to do like the activities, so that kind of experiential learning with the students rather than just trying to coach them through it. So I think that's really neat. I think, you know, exactly too, like Danielle wrote that teaching emotion regulation and coping skills in the classroom can be super helpful, right? And if it's part of our daily routine, that can just kind of help instill that sense of like, this is normal, this is what we do, right? When we have feelings, this is kind of how we approach it. So you're really helping from a young age, right? And scaffolding that learning too across time, with, you know, how to cope with things. Some neat stuff. Any other comments that people want to share about this topic? Yeah, I really appreciate the discussion. I think this discussion really helps add to this experience. All right, so as you probably already know, right, that there's lots of things that we do that are resilient, or there's just kind of things about us that make us resilient, or that adaptability and flexibility. And there's tons of, you know, research and all those things that we can geek out about later, but just that the more we can foster a growth mindset, right, seeing a challenge and not seeing it as this insurmountable obstacle, but rather seeing a challenge, or seeing a speed bump and seeing it as a challenge, right? We are going to approach it and figure out what we can do with it. So that flexibility, or that ability to kind of have a growth mindset, really helps us persist in the face of any kind of setback. It helps put us in more of like a non-defensive kind of reaction mode, to help us learn from a challenge, right? To help us learn from criticism, and to help kind of motivate us to remain flexible and kind of pursue things. So the more, you know, I think there's lots of strategies that we talked about, right? The more we can kind of model that behavior for others, in terms of like how, you know, modeling how you think about things, or how you approach a difficult thing, right? Or how, even just like we talked about, right? If you have bigger feelings one day and how you need to take your own time out, right? You're modeling again how you're not stuck, right? You're not being kind of overrun with a specific feeling or a specific obstacle, but rather you're kind of taking all the information into context and you're kind of growing with it. You're moving on from it. So there's lots of studies that looked at, you know, just how so we know that, I mean, for me, at least from my own personal experience, the more flexible I can be towards something, the more growth mindset I can have towards something, that personally, I appreciate that kind of lifestyle more. I find it less stressful. But kind of the cool thing is that when you look at resilience in like hospital systems or just at work, that in general, the more that growth mindset you kind of sprinkle on things, or the more approach you are in certain things, right, to challenges, that individuals who score higher on resilience measures, meaning that you self-identify as being more resilient or adaptable, that people tend to have lower turnover in jobs, less of that absenteeism or what we call presenteeism, where you're just sitting there surfing the web, right? You're not really engaged in work. You know, the more resilient you are, the way you can adapt to things, you tend to have more improved physical and mental health, and which is especially important because we know that whole like mind-body connection, right? That how we think can influence how we feel, and how we feel can influence how we think, right? It's this vicious cycle. So that's super important. You know, the more of that adaptability or flexibility, right, the stronger we might feel like that we work as a team, right? We have more of that camaraderie, which helps combat stress. And also too, right, when we have that resilience or that kind of growth mindset, it's easier sometimes for leaders to kind of, you know, be a workplace leader, or for you to even identify as that, right? When you feel like you're appreciated, that you can kind of grow adaptively and all those kind of things. I think this is kind of neat too. This is within a healthcare system. They actually took a resilience protocol. So kind of it'd be like the super intense version of what we're going over today. And they took multiple weeks and they taught every single resilience facet. And it's kind of what if you ever attended the resilience echoes, it's kind of what that was modeled after. And so they gave these nurses working in like the KU hospital system this resilience intervention, and then afterwards, everyone's scores actually increase in terms of like how they rated their own resilience, right? Their ability to bounce back from things. Compassion fatigue or burnout actually decreased. The risk for that did. So it's neat to kind of think about like, oh, like, you know, by taking this time for yourself, right, for kind of embracing the willingness to learn, and talk about these things, that, you know, you too can, you know, there's positive things over the long run that learning these kinds of strategies, or even just bolstering the ones you already have, can really help with. All right. So in terms of kind of starting down the path of what can this look like, right, in a classroom, or how can we build what we call like a culture of resilience within our own workforce? And I just like to share this slide because it's nice to kind of have like the more of a plan that you can have, or the more of a structure, right, kind of planning things out, can make it easier to kind of implement across time. So this is actually a start of the day resilience checklist that that they put out during the pandemic, with kind of the goal of helping other, you know, educators, or just, you know, healthcare workers, anyone who might find benefit from this, to kind of focus on more of the positives. The way that, and I don't mean like butterflies, rainbows, completely unrealistic positives, but things are more adaptable, or things that that, you know, can kind of provide us those glimpses of hope kind of throughout our day. So in general, we as humans, we're kind of designed to hyper focus on negative things. Our brains are like complete Teflon when it comes to any kind of positive experience. If you think about like why that might be, right? If you think about maybe saber-toothed tiger time, right? Cavemen, that you would want to learn from negative experiences, right? If you had a hunt that failed, or you had, right, whatever the situation, like something not go as well, bad weather come in, that you'd want to remember those negatives, right? So you could hopefully kind of think about it, problem solve it, and move on from it, right? And survive. And so we just have this kind of ability to really hyper focus on negatives. But this, for example, like the start of the day resilience checklist is really helpful in terms of trying to help us remember, kind of give more time to some of the more positive things. So that way we can kind of hopefully have a takeaway of not every day is, kind of doom and gloom. And even though it might be that, might be perceived that way because we can just attend so highly to all those negative experiences that we have. So with this kind of idea of how, how could we start implementing resilience within our own workforce, with some of the medical teams that I've worked with, just something as simple as during a shift change or during a morning meeting, just asking everyone what's one thing that you're grateful for today, or what brings you joy? When did I feel the most alive, right? Is there anything that can kind of get you to refocus, even if it doesn't have to be a giant momentous event that happens. It could be something like, I had coffee, that brings me joy. But trying to focus yourself or practicing that refocusing on, right, something that does make you happy or something that does bring you joy or have a more positive effect can really kind of set you up for the rest of the day. You can handle more stress, all those sorts of things. So in working with nurses, something that they found helpful was to, during their morning meeting, that they would do their meeting, do their business stuff, and then at the end they would take time to they just went around the room and said, okay, what's one thing that you're grateful for today? And then they would go on kind of with their day. For some people, kind of starting their meeting off with a mindfulness moment or some kind of deep breathing exercise was useful for some teams. So they would start off with that, and that was kind of their ritual, if you want, or want to say a ritual for kind of starting the day, right? Kind of this is getting me in the groove to think about other things, but now I'm going to take this one moment with my team and kind of just take a moment to focus on myself. So, and checklists can look different depending on what kind of context you're in, but this definitely, and we'll pass the slides out later too, can be an example in terms of just a way to kind of start things out and try it out within more of a work culture. So again, right, the more we can build a culture of resilience, right, if our leaders set the tone, just kind of the way it works out, that if we can have people who are in a position of power kind of adopt this kind of even a checklist, or just even thinking about in the classrooms, right? There's the hierarchy of you're kind of in charge of the classroom, you have the kiddos in the classroom, that the more that you can keep doing what you're already doing, which is great, modeling that behavior or kind of letting the space happen in terms of, right, focusing on some of these positives can really help set the tone or the culture of that classroom or of that larger school. So how do we build resiliency? So self-calming is definitely one of those things. If we can't get ourselves calm, right, how can we expect the kiddos to be calm or anyone else in our household to be calm? So just kind of what we talked about, right, being able to express just hey, I'm thinking, I'm feeling this way, and I'm going to take some time for myself is just super helpful, right? With the larger purpose of you're actually showing someone how to self-calm. It's a super adaptive strategy. If you've ever, I don't know if you've had this experience, maybe you're at work, right? And you notice there's someone else in this, before we were remote, maybe there's someone in that group who was super anxious about other things going on. And we as humans can pick up on that anxiety, right? And sometimes we start feeling kind of anxious too, or amped up. We're like, oh man, Susan's really anxious. I'm anxious too now. And pretty soon the entire room feels anxious. Maybe they don't know why. But so just so anxiety runs through a herd, but so can calmness. So setting that tone, right, of how to adaptively kind of approach emotions, or how to take time for ourselves, or just, reorienting to naming one thing that's positive or that you're grateful for today, that can kind of help set that tone and help kind of combat that anxiety that's happening. In terms of ability to self-calm too, right, just being aware of how you tend to manage your own anxiety or stress, and whether or not you tend to take on the anxiety and stress of others. I think just having that kind of, you don't have to know the answer to it, but just more of, self-reflection and having that ability to kind of recognize in yourself, like, are you someone who takes on a lot of things? Do you, when you're asked, you have difficulty setting boundaries, right? And it's not going to be a simple fix where you can just be like, okay, waving the magic wand and now I completely I'm like the Zen master of self-calming. But just being able to identify some of those things, right? Like, why am I anxious? Is because like my roommate, my neighbor is asking me to do all these extra responsibilities, right? Just having that awareness can be so powerful. Thinking about too, right? Like for all of us in different situations, this is going to be different. But just knowing, right? Like, how do you get calm? For some of us, it's, before giving a presentation or before, being in a classroom or talking to some parents, walking the stairs can be helpful, right? Because that might be, that physicality might be a way to help you kind of get calm. And then to know too, just, for yourself, like, how long, once you get calm, do you stay calm? Like, do you get amped up pretty fast, or are there other things like deep breathing or grounding or being more of that observer role? Are those all things that help keep you calm? And across different situations, you might have different tools, right, that work for those different situations. But just kind of being mindful of, kind of what are your go-to strategies, what works in some places, what works not in others. You could also be someone who, in order for you to be calm, you need others to be calm too. I think that's kind of true of a lot of us, right? Again, with the kind of anxiety example, if one person's anxious in the room, right, a lot of us perceive that anxiety too. But that's just, important to know for yourself. Like, if you are someone who really feeds off kind of how other people are feeling, that, just to be aware of, is that a thing that happens? Do I need to kind of, in that case, like, think of myself being inside a bubble that other people's feelings can't hit, right? So there's lots of ways to kind of approach those things. And main takeaway too is that this is hard stuff. If this were easy, right, everyone would be super chilled out, mindful, never have any kind of stressors, right? But there's always going to be stressors. There's always going to be things vying for our attention. And even though we can't control all the craziness that happens in the world, right, the one thing we can't control is how we approach it. So my hope is that you can even recognize in yourselves, right, that I think you all do a lot of these strategies, and hopefully there's some strategies that you might be willing to try out, see kind of, if anything that you're already doing could be tweaked, or just in general, right, to know that you are doing all the stuff that you could be doing. So one of these strategies too, in terms of how can you get yourself calm, right? Because I feel like for anyone, whether it be kids, whether it be us, right, as adults, if you can get yourself calm, then everything else is like a lot smoother sailing, right? If we're panicked or we're anxious about something and we start going into like crisis mode, right, everyone else is going to start going into crisis mode and we're just not functional. So one of the strategies is actually visualization. And so the caveat to this is that some people, if you've never tried visualization before, we're about to do it together, like a guided visualization. I'll walk you through it. But for some people, I felt so bad. One of the first times I was doing visualization with someone, found out that they could not visualize. So I literally sat there for about 15, 20 minutes and walked them through a script and realized the person could not visualize. So I know we're in a diverse group. So if you cannot visualize, that's okay. We all have our own things about us. For people that have a difficult time visualizing, or you just have too many things going on and you can't find that space, I always like to include a picture now with things, because we can focus on the picture and focus on either our senses or our breathing during this time. Any questions before we begin? Okay, so feel free to, I'm just going to stare at my screen and read some stuff, but you're more than welcome to stare at the pretty beach scene from about 6 miles away from where I'm at, or you can, turn your videos off for this section. I can pull it up. All right. So we're going to get started with our guided visualization. For a few moments, allow yourself to take several nice, long, deep breaths. Notice the cool air coming in, filling your lungs, and the soothing, warm air going out. So focus with each breath, your belly rising and falling with each breath. And as you continue to breathe at your own pace, focusing on the in breath, the inhale, and the exhale, just let all of your thoughts float away as you continue to focus on your breathing. And as you're breathing, you might mentally scan your body and notice if you're holding any tension in your muscles. And as you breathe in and breathe out, gently let all the tension melt away with every breath. And as you feel that tension melt away, keep focusing on your breathing in and out, in and out. With each breath, just feel yourself more and more sinking down into your chair or just more comfortable wherever you are. And as you continue breathing in and breathing out, in your mind's eye, you see yourself descending down a long, narrow wooden stairway towards a beautiful, inviting beach. As you walk down these stairs, you feel your bare feet on the rough, weathered steps. And with each step down, you feel more and more of your tension gently melting away from your body. As you continue down the stairway, you notice how bright white the sand is and how it stretches down the shoreline as far as you can see. The ocean is a deep shade of blue, and the waves have fine white crests that sweep towards the shore. As you continue to walk down the stairway with your bare feet on the rough, weathered steps, you reach the end of the stairway and step down, sinking into the warm, soothing sand. As you rub the sand slightly between your toes, a soothing sensation of relaxation gently melts through your entire body. And as you notice this, you hear the roaring sounds of the sea's surf, the waves crashing over and over, and it calms your mind and allows you to feel even more relaxed. So as you walk in the sand, feeling the nice warm sand between your toes and the roaring sound of the sea's surf, you begin walking slowly towards the edge of the water and notice the warm sun on your face and shoulders. You can feel the warmth of the sun radiating down your back The salty smell of the sea air invigorates you, and so you take a deep breath and breathe out slowly. And as you breathe in this salty air, you feel more and more relaxed and refreshed with each breath. Finally, as you're walking, you reach the water's edge, and you gladly invite the waves to flow over your toes and ankles. You watch as the waves glide smoothly towards you, gently sweeping around your feet and seeing the trails of seawater that flow slowly back out towards the ocean again. You notice the cool water feels soft and comforting as you enjoy a few moments allowing yourself to gaze out on the far-reaching horizon. Overhead, you notice two seagulls gracefully soaring high above the ocean. And you can hear their soft cries becoming faint as they glide away from you. And seeing all these sights, hearing the waves, and all these sensations allow you to let go and relax more and more. After a moment, you begin strolling down the beach at the water's edge. You feel a cool, gentle breeze pressing lightly against your back. And with each step, you feel yourself relaxing more and more. And as you continue to breathe in and out, you continue walking down the beach, and you can notice details of sights and sounds around you, the soothing sensations of the sun, the breeze, and the sand below your feet. And as you continue your walk down the beach, you notice a colorful beach chair resting in a nice peaceful spot with powdery soft sand that looks undisturbed. So you approach this comfortable chair and you slowly sit down, lie back, and settle in. You take in a long, deep breath and slowly breathe out and feel even more relaxed and comfortable resting in this chair. And for a few moments more, you let yourself enjoy the sights and sounds of this beautiful day on the beach. Continuing to breathe in and breathe out. And when you feel ready, you can gently bring your attention back to your feet and wiggle your toes and get ready to get up and walk and leave the beach behind. So when you're ready, in your mind's eye, you can get back up out of the chair and start walking back to this room. And feel rested, more comfortable sitting where you are now. And whenever you're ready to rejoin, feel free to start wiggling your toes, wiggling your hands, your fingers. and feeling more awake with each breath. All right. Well, whenever you're ready, welcome back. So what were your all takeaways from doing visualization? Yeah, I think we all need to do more visualizations. Yeah. Yeah, I think someone wrote that, right? It's super accessible. It's a great mental break. I think that sums up perfectly. I think the visualization too, like even though I'm talking to you, there's like tons of resources online that you can like download stuff for free. There's actually the Mindfulness Research Center over here at UCLA. If you look up, it's Mark, and we'll definitely make sure you all have the link too. But they have like free guided meditations or visualizations online, and they have different lengths of ones. They have longer ones, they have shorter ones. And thanks for saying that. Insight Timer is also a great app too. And because like maybe some days you might need a longer one versus a shorter one. And the best part is that, you know, if you're sitting waiting for an appointment or just taking a break for yourself, right? Like unless you have on speakerphone, no one's going to know what you're doing. So I think that's kind of a cool thing too. Yes, Lori, I like it. Referring to it as going to your happy place. Yep. And the more we can get the kiddos used to doing this, right? It's going to be like this really cool habit that they just automatically do. So lots of cool stuff to come from it. Yeah. All right. So back into some more strategies. So visualization is one strategy that you all now know how to do. Some people just with visualization in general, I've heard that I know like when I do it too, if I'm doing it in a group, I always get anxious about am I breathing too fast or too slow or like rate of breathing. And I think it's great that there's tons of apps that you can change the rate of your breathing. I think just always good to kind of remind yourselves too that, you know, my rate of breathing might be different than Melissa's, might be different than Lori's, that, you know, and it's okay to breathe at different rates. So just because you might feel behind of the recording or ahead of the recording doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Oops. Let's see if I can go back. Okay. So other ways so there's the self-calming, right? There's visualization. Another way to practice self-care is physical, right? And a lot of individuals said that physicality part can be really helpful. So I feel like whenever we don't have time, right, exercise is the first to go. So sometimes just trying to focus on like, well, maybe I can't, right, walk the same number of blocks or run the same distance I'm used to doing. Trying to, you know, having that flexible or that growth mindset, right, and thinking about, okay, how can I be creative and still be able to get walking in despite my entire schedule blowing up and I have no time to do it. So, you know, are there stairs where you're at? Is there a way that you can, you know, have a meeting and walk at the same time, right? So it's like all these, like, if this were easy stuff, right, we wouldn't be talking about it, but it's trying to figure out a way to still schedule stuff or still take time for yourself physically, because it's only going to do such great stuff for you just physically and mentally in the long run. Physically, right, we can take care of ourselves also through nutrition. So, and I don't mean to say like, oh my gosh, cut out all fried foods, because I myself love fried foods, but more of like, okay, how can I try to find a nutritious snack like an apple, right, that has fiber in it too, so it'll keep me fuller for longer, and not have like sugar crashes. So the more whole foods or the more nutrient rich foods that we can eat ourselves, right, or help kind of impart upon the young ones to also eat, that that can help just in terms of our own energy. How we think and feel is also tied to nutrition. So It's just something to that whole gut brain axis that they talk about, that like the more whole foods, the more nutritious foods you can eat, that can it's linked to inflammation, lowering inflammation, and also that can also improve how you think and feel about stuff. Okay, so something else that we kind of talk about in terms of resilience strategies is within the category of being able to self-replenish. And so this can be just like we talked about in that chat, right? The different physical, could be emotional, spiritual, it can be social, time for yourself, right? Just knowing how you self-replenish or how you charge your battery, right? When your battery's low, and different situations might be different for different things. So just kind of knowing, being able to ask yourself, okay, how full is my bucket right now? Meaning how charges my battery? What recharges me? What depletes my battery? And, you know, say if I get completely depleted, like how many hours is it going to take me to recharge, right? Like depending on the, how you're charging your phone, right? That time to recharge can be very variable. And so it's just important to know, like, you know, you're just be able to reflect in of yourself of like, what kind of stressors really deplete your battery? What's going to be faster to recharge from? Just having that insight, or even just, you know, being able to impart upon the kiddos about how, right, like different things take different types of recovery time. Okay, other things, practicing gratitude is a really cool intervention that they've done lots of different, like just psychology studies on. And practicing gratitude, or being able to set aside a few minutes just, you know, during the day to write down something that you're thankful for, does a lot of cool stuff for your mood in terms of improving it. So even though it seems kind of like a silly, simple thing to do, right? Like, okay, like, yeah, I can name something I'm thankful for my family, right? Or my health or my life, faith, right? There's lots of things that you can write down, but the more you can make it like part of your routine, it's neat that it really does kind of help manage mood, helps manage worries. Because again, right, as humans, we tend to focus on the negatives and not so much the positives. So this kind of helps us refocus on maybe our goals or values, kind of things that are not so negative all the time. Kind of a similar thing as this name 3 good things practice. And so kind of thinking about like your schedule throughout the day, right? If you're trying to include this into more of like a workforce or a workplace routine too, right? Just like after a meeting, or could be like a ritual to start a meeting, to, you know, just be able to write down at least one good thing that happened today. And again, it's getting you away from focusing on only the negatives that happen, or the disagreements that happen, right? And focusing more on those like the larger values that we have. Scheduling activities. So I know in the chat, we talked about lots of different to-do lists, and that's helpful. But the more you can schedule activities, not only does it help you, you know, be able to do some of the activities that you want to do, right, or make time for your own self-care, but that, what we call scheduling, it's activating, and it also is a way that's really cool that helps combat if you feel more down or hopeless, or feel more worried or anxious. So even if you're just not, you know, in the mood to schedule, the more you can schedule, you know, things to look forward to, things, you know, self-care things, just even things that you have to do as part of work. The scheduling really has lots of mood improvement stuff attached to it. And also too, right, if you think about all the different uncertain things that happen to us throughout the day or throughout the year, that it's tiring, right, to be constantly flexible and deal with all the different uncertain things that come at you. But scheduling, right, how you're going to approach it, when you're going to approach it, or just even knowing that you have something to look forward to, that kind of helps us feel like we have some control over the universe that is ever changing. Something else can be fun to play with each other during a work group or with the kiddos is something, you know, called self-care bingo. You can, you know, if you want to become like the self-care master, right? Of course you could, you know, make it a goal to do all these things. But I think this is like a neat visual to kind of think about all the different ways that we can practice self-care. And sometimes in the moment we're just like, I know I need to take time for myself, but I just feel uninspired. So I think it's kind of neat to think about, like, you know, you can bake things, go for a walk, listen to music, stay hydrated, right? Celebrate the small wins. I think that always gets short shrift, but you gotta celebrate those small things. You can kind of keep making positive progress. Right, decluttering, brunch date, new podcast. So there's lots of different things to think about, lots of different, I think it could be a fun classroom game in a way, right? And also too, kids could learn from each other. I've played this with colleagues, right? You're kind of like, oh, like you like to do dance parties, I like to do it too. Or, learn about, things about each other, but also just like what other ways that other people practice stuff too is kind of neat to think about. Oh, I think Roxy had a comment too about kind of back to the activity scheduling that is something that I actually use too. And I think I know a few of you do too, is just like, I have to have a planner, I have to have my day scheduled out. And there's lots of different online sheets too that help in terms of, just even where to start, right? How to even try to schedule your day, if that's something that you want help with. All right. Some of you already brought this up, right? But emotional expressiveness, this is super helpful. I feel like it's hard because we as adults, depending on how we grew up, right? Emotions weren't talked about. We might not even know how to label our own emotions, or sometimes because emotions are so complex, we don't even know what we're feeling. And so just kind of what we talked about before, right? When we're talking about things together is that, right, there's emotions are kind of like our alarm system going off saying that something's not quite right. And the more we can model, right, like big feelings and little feelings and how we kind of cope with them, right? Like maybe I don't feel that great right now and I need like a timeout, or I need to give myself my own timeout to kind of process through stuff, right? The more we can kind of talk through our reasoning, kind of exemplify, right, to model that kind of behavior, right, we can kind of scaffold and teach the kiddos in our classroom or whoever we're working with just other ways to approach emotions too, that they're not bad, they're not, it's like it's okay to feel grumpy sometimes too, right? But it's more about like, do you get stuck in that grumpiness, or do you just kind of let it wash over you and kind of focus on something else too? So yeah, I like what's going on in the chat too, that like Melissa brought up, that just even back to the to-do list, that right, kind of starting things you've already done to kind of build that positive momentum. Lots of good can come from that. Yeah. Then noticing too within your own emotions, right, being able to not only describe maybe what we're going through, or just acknowledging and not placing judgment on emotion, but also to just be able to notice in of ourselves, like, do I tend to focus on what's going on internally with me or more externally? Because that can really give us a lot of information in terms of like maybe like I feel down about a situation that happened, but then being able to kind of tease apart, like, is that my feeling, or is that like the situation that's causing this feeling? Or am I telling myself self-critical thoughts that are just thoughts and that's it? So it kind of can help us tease out apart, like, what's a mood, what's a situation versus what's a thought, and be able to kind of fact check ourselves too. It's another tool. We have links for this too, kind of with stuff, but so this is the feelings from thermometer, and I'm sure you probably have at some point used something similar to this. But so if you think about, green is where we want to be at. We want to, like, I would love to be green, hanging out on the couch and just thinking my thoughts. But sometimes, right, there's might be things that put me into the yellow category, maybe sometimes rarely in the red category. But this kind of visual can help, at least it's helped me kind of work with families and kiddos, kind of focus on like, okay, like say if little Johnny is at a 75, right, he's kind of in this like red orange zone, right? Then focusing on like, okay, what could we do to get you back to a green zone, right? So thinking about like, okay, maybe someone took his toy and now he's here, right? So then thinking about like, okay, Johnny, what things could you do to bring you back into this green zone? So kind of talking someone through this, right, can be helpful in terms of like, not only, one, kind of disarming the situation, but also that you're in a place where you can help model the thought process, right? You're kind of model like, oh, there's a strategy we can use. Let's insert the strategy. Maybe it's take a deep breath or walk away, right? And then maybe that's what's going to be, or taking that time out is going to help bring you back to that green zone. Have any of you used something similar to this?
I guess what I know I practice, I teach. I'm not a teacher, but when I do my facilitation, is that when you get triggered, which is usually when you go to the red, be conscious about that, because sometimes we just react. We're not even being conscious. Is take a little pause, realize what's going on with you. Just take the pause, realize what's going on with you, because that will help you decide better what's the next step. And I like to add now, maybe you can go to one of those strategies that help you, depending also where you are. Sometimes you're at a meeting and it's just breathing, right?
Yeah.
But at different places, in different circumstances, you could use different strategies. I guess the first one is to be mindful where I am right now. That changed the story just right there.
Yeah,
what I
definitely.
Like about Stephanie, Carly, what I like about what she just shared was being mindful, and something that I'm working on, and of course from looking at different videos on YouTube and my own studies, is the whole concept of stopping and finding out where inside of you is that feeling coming from, and then saying what is causing that, what just happened that made me react that way. And so we kind of separate ourselves from the action, so we will become observers, because a lot of times what I'm learning is it's not the incident and the situation that's triggering us, it's the incident that's causing us to be triggered by that little person inside of us that might have been affected 10, 15, 20 years ago or 50 years ago. So being able to realize that our reactions, our trigger reactions, is not the individuals or the circumstances that we are currently in. Something is happening that reminds us of a past. And we have to figure that out and then realize that we are adults, we're the mature person, we're not being harmed. So reassess how we do, and then do the breathing, do the being present, and realizing that we're safe in the moment.
So, yeah, I think you summed that up perfectly, and it's almost as if you knew what my next slide was going to be. That it's kind of talking about, right, how can we separate ourselves from the feeling or what's kind of going on, the situation, and also just even noticing in of ourselves, right, like where are we feeling it, right? So maybe it's something, just like you said, that triggers us because of something that something from our past, right, or some former, like a previous interaction with something that we've kind of encoded as a threat potentially, or something like that. And so, like, right, just being able to acknowledge, like, wow, I feel really shocked or angry about this, and that's okay for me to feel this way, right? And even just being able to notice, like, the body sensations associated with it, like, am I feeling it in my jaw? Is it heaviness in my chest? Is it in my stomach, right? Being able to kind of link that mind-body connection is just super important. So I appreciate you sharing that too. I think you also, both individuals who shared, I think you also touched on this too, right? So say if there's something that's triggering, right, and brings you up into that red zone, just as much as you can, try to stay in that observer moment or mode, and right, stay calm, step out, but you're staying in. So, there are ways to kind of, focus on breath, to slow our breath down, in terms of like helping us stop, right, to get the space to think about kind of what's happening and be in more of that observer role. And so, just this slide just kind of sums up different ways that we can focus on breath, right, to help slow things down. Another way too, right, kind of again with this slowing the breath down or slowing kind of our reaction time down to something that might be triggering, is to, kind of as you breathe slowly, to try and name the emotion that you're feeling. And so then as you inhale, maybe I'm imagining anger. As I inhale, and then I'd be imagining anger, and then as I exhale, I would repeat the word ease and imagine that anger or whatever the the scared or anxious feeling would just melt away. So kind of doing that, you can kind of help visualize, right? It's kind of back in that visualization category of things kind of melting away and their power going away. And again, these slides will be available for you all after the sessions, but just going to skip ahead slightly. Some of these slides just refer to different, like what we call facets of resilience, or different kind of resilience categories. And so and they all kind of relate to this adaptability component, right? So the more we can commit to a certain situation, kind of exercise what we, what we can control, right? Given how uncontrollable the universe is. So kind of focusing on values, what we can control, and seeing things as a challenge and something to grow from, that having that kind of what we call hardiness is going to help us kind of see things as a challenge, right? And kind of bounce back in the face of adversity. Let's go through that one. Kind of the cool thing with hardiness too, right? So having kind of those values and being able to tie them to, right, like exerting control over smaller things within your life while the universe chaos happens. That the more hardy you are, right, or your ability to bounce back from these things, you actually tend to, have less ill health effects. So individuals who tend to be more hardy actually have just lower BMI, higher the good type of cholesterol. Lower hardiness tends to be associated with more cardiovascular risk when they do these big studies, which is kind of cool. And the more hardy you are, right, or more ability to bounce back from things, you also tend to, some studies found that's actually protective against just you experiencing stress, right? So the more adaptive, flexible you are, that tends to, right, it's how you interpret the world, right? It might take a bigger stressor to make you feel stressed out. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second so I can make sure we get to the right slide.
Stephanie, as you're pulling that up, one of the thoughts I had about this concept of hardiness, which I love, is kind of that idea with the to-do list of, kind of hedging your bets a little bit before you even start something, but also in having this conversation about resilience. And really, you did this right off the top, is just acknowledging that all of you all here today are resilient, right? You're showing that by being here, and that even young people who are struggling a lot show that they're resilient and hardy in all kinds of ways. I remember working with a young man, Matt, when this was many, many years ago when I was doing school-based mental health. And this young friend was struggling across the board. I mean, failing every class. I mean, he had percentages so low, I didn't even know like it was possible to get like a 3% in a class. I mean, this friend was really, really struggling. And so in talking with his teachers, I mean, just these behaviors are wrong and this and this and this and all these different pieces. And I just sat there and I said, he shows up at school every single day, and if you all had any idea what's going on with this kid at home, like, it's amazing that he gets up every morning and makes it to school, right? Like, I would say that this kid was really, really resilient. So also just recognizing and celebrating, the last year and a half, 2 years has been impossible, right? So if it feels impossible, it's because it's been impossible. And we are making it through and getting through. And so we are all resilient and hardy in those ways. So kind of giving ourselves credit and other people credit for that kind of right off the bat, right? And then getting that momentum and kind of continuing forward.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Stephanie.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's just nice. It's always helpful to think about things in context too. All right, so kind of with that too, right? One of the just something that helps us, manage our own worries, helps us feel better when our mood decreases sometimes, and just really can help us, right, just during stressful times in general, whether it be health, kind of world stresses, right, all the different stresses happening, that having a social support network can be really helpful. We all have different kinds of social support networks. There's no kind of right or wrong way to go about it. Some people, it's mostly comprised of our family. Maybe it's for some people, it's our friends. For some people, it's more of our coworkers. And for some people, it's a mix. Generally, in terms of social support, the more you can have a mix of people, it actually just kind of tends to help you more in the long run. And so the more you can, what we call like diversify your social support group, the better. And the reason for that is more thinking like maybe like Melissa, for example, has had certain experiences in a certain life domain. And I know I can reach out to her when I feel down or something like that, because I know that she's, maybe had a similar experience or knows of someone, right? And so the more we can have, like, or maybe my sister, right, when I have frustrations about school because we went to the same school, I can, kind of hash out that with her. Something just given the pandemic and stressors like that, it's also interesting to kind of reflect and think about, like, when's the last time I contacted that person? Right, because a lot of things got shifted around and we couldn't see people in person for a while. And so something that I would encourage you all to do too is, in terms of like, growing your social support network or just kind of checking in with them, would be to kind of, think about like, when was the last time you either, did you see them, text them, call them? Because I think there's a lot of different stressors that happened recently, and some of the people we maybe were closer with may have fallen to the wayside, or they had their own stressors going on too. So always important to check in with those supports. And so one of the things that we're going to do, I think activities are the funnest thing, conversations and activities during these things. And so for the next, or in a little bit, for about the next 15 minutes, we're going to put you all into different breakout rooms. We just assign them randomly. There's going to be, I'm going to float across the different rooms. We have a breakout room leader for each room. And what we're going to do is that we're going to work on, one, hopefully you can meet each other virtually and have it not be a big group that's hard to talk in. But be able to identify at least, one strategy that maybe you're already doing, or that you want to try out that we talked about, or maybe it's a different strategy that you just happen to know about. And think about it like, okay, say if visualization is something that I want to try out, when could I do it? Could I schedule it for a certain day of the week? Like, when would I know I personally will have time to maybe spend like 5-10 minutes to do a visualization? So you're probably familiar with SMART goals, right? So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. And so you don't have to hit every single category. We're not going to do the thing of like, you can't leave until you have a SMART goal, but more of like just thinking about broadly, like, okay, like say if I say, yeah, I'm going to try visualization this next week. I want to be more specific in terms of like, am I going to go onto a website and find a pre-recorded one? Am I going to read a script to myself, right? Thinking about like kind of the how you're going to do it can help. The more we think about the specifics, or like how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, can help us actually do it. Because sometimes, right, if we don't schedule it, or if we don't know exactly what we're going to do, even if we do it, sometimes we forget that we do it and forget to kind of celebrate that we had that positive experience. So there's that component. The more we can schedule it, the more chance there's of us actually doing it, and maybe it might become a habit too. So I know it's probably a lot of information in a short amount of time, but the breakout room leaders also have the same information instructions, so they're going to help you all kind of walk through that as well. So thank you all for participating in those breakout rooms. I like more activities, experiential things in general, because I think you're all a bunch of neat individuals who all have your own experiences to kind of add to the group's bigger experience. So I think breakout rooms are really neat. So I know you're in one of different, I think we had 6 rooms in total. And anyone can share either in the chat or just unmute yourself. Were there any kind of big takeaways or things that surprised you about being in the group? Yeah. Melissa's shouting out to group 6. for me, just when I was bouncing back and forth across the different rooms, I agree. I think all of the groups were awesome. I appreciate your willingness to share with each other and just kind of being open and vulnerable too. Heard some great goals being set, some really nice specific ones too. I also too, just, you know, across, I thought it was neat that across all the rooms, just how a lot of the same themes came up too, like whether it be we turn to faith for some of our self-care, kind of to draw from that resilience, whether it be you know, physical activity, whether it be talking to friends. I think it was neat to see to see all those commonalities. And I appreciate you saying that in the chat too, Missy, that right, for some it does seem it is hard, right? This is hard stuff. It's hard to find something to focus on for self-care. It's a hard thing to do. I don't know if any of the breakout room leaders wanted to share anything from their groups.
In room 5, one theme that kind of came up was, regardless of the specific strategy, that it was helpful for a number of folks to open and or close their workday with some sort of self-care to help kind of prepare yourself for the day, but then also once you've been in that kind of more stressful environment, to wrap up as well, which I thought was really a nice theme.
Yeah, just having those rituals, right, to kind of open and close our day are just so important.
In group 2, we also talked about having some flexibility with yourself, even with scheduled activities. When say a relaxing walk becomes another thing in the day that you have to then worry about because you've planned it. So then being willing to move from say 3 to 3:30 instead of giving up on the activity altogether. So reducing the pressure and remembering what the point of it is.
Yeah. Exactly, right. Just to focus on kind of what's the larger reason that I want to go for that walk, right? Or that I want to do this.
We talked about like boundaries with work. And then we also talked about the little things, like whether it's playing with dogs or using your favorite hand lotion, like just something that brings you a little joy and gives you a pause where you're kind of taking a break from hustle and bustle.
I love that your examples too are big and small things, right? Because it doesn't have to always be, I always refer to it as, it's like, it doesn't have to be a marathon run, right? Or something like that. It could be something like using the hand lotion, because that, I mean, that's all stuff that still counts with the purpose, right? To kind of take some time for yourself.
Yeah, in group 3, a lot of people had things about taking walks or kind of incorporating exercise or even more mindful-based things like making sure you're taking a break during the workday. One thing I did notice is that a lot of people made sure to kind of start small and work their way up, either adding something later down the line or kind of, you know, seeing how they do in like just doing twice a week, and then maybe eventually they can extend it to every day. Which I thought was pretty cool.
Nice. Good. Thanks for reporting all that.
In group 1, we talked a little bit about some strategies that could work for anyone, or for like to be able to put that into your life and make sure you are getting it done. So we talked about the value of writing it down and just using like a planner or a to-do list or things like that, just to have it visually there, and also make it part of the motivation to like be able to cross it off and just being kind of like something more tangible that you have to refer to in order to kind of like make sure you are incorporating those strategies into your day or your week.
Definitely. Yeah.
My takeaway is the importance of having people in your life, whether it be personal or work life, that you can commit to focusing on this with. I have staff on my team that committed to these 2 hours of their day to really focus as a team on self-care. And so I'm anxious to take that and build on that. So I know that I'm looking at some of their faces, and I know that this will be a part of our conversation because it's so important for all of us. And so I need their help in holding us all accountable to that.
I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's neat to hear just, how a resilient culture can be adopted and promoted within that realm. It's neat. I know we're just at about time. I appreciate you all just being, one, taking the time for yourself today to be here to share these 2 hours together. I appreciate your all's vulnerability with, just willingness to be open and learn from each other. I think that's a great quality that you all share, just in terms of being within the learning and helping fields. And, in terms of takeaways, I definitely just hope that you will find ways or kind of help make it a priority to recharge your own battery. I appreciate you all being here today too.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. And thanks everyone for joining. And we will send out the certificates of attendance as soon as we can. And we'll also send a follow-up email with the slides and the resources and the recording. So we'll be in touch with you all soon and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you all.